As my heir, William now assumes the Scottish titles which have meant so much to me. He succeeds me as Duke of Cornwall.
The gates of Buckingham Palace have never felt this heavy, not like this. Not since the explosive abdication crisis of 1936, when Edward VIII gave up the crown for love, has the monarchy stood at such a tense and defining crossroads. But what is unfolding right now behind those towering iron gates, inside those guarded and glittering corridors, makes that historic moment feel like nothing more than a rehearsal. King Charles III, the man who waited more than 70 years for the crown, is now preparing to do the unthinkable. This is the same man who stood in the rain at his mother's funeral, carrying the weight of a nation on his shoulders, and now he is ready to walk away from it all. And he is not doing it quietly either, not with a soft statement or a controlled announcement. He is preparing a final address, a powerful farewell that will officially begin the reign of King William V and Queen Catherine. But the version the palace will present is only part of the story. The real turning point did not happen in a throne room or during a ceremony. It began behind closed doors, in a private meeting filled with tension, emotion, and unresolved conflict. A woman pushed to her limit, a son caught between duty and reality, and a king who finally found the strength he had been searching for his entire life. So what really drove Charles to this moment? And what happened when Queen Camilla stood up and broke the silence in that room? And even more curious, why is Camilla, the woman Charles risked everything to be with, suddenly nowhere to be seen? This situation goes far deeper than a simple royal transition, and the truth behind it carries far more weight than any official announcement ever could. To understand why King Charles would step down, you have to look at what the crown demanded from him over a lifetime. Charles Philip Arthur George was not raised to rule freely, he was raised to wait. For decades, he endured scandal, heartbreak, and public pressure, including the loss of a beloved figure that shaped how the world saw the monarchy. Through all of it, he remained patient, controlled, and committed to duty. When Queen Elizabeth II passed away on September 8, 2022, Charles was already 73 years old, making him the oldest person in British history to take the throne. At an age when most people step away from responsibility, he was only just beginning. His coronation on May 6, 2023 at Westminster Abbey was a global spectacle filled with tradition, symbolism, and attention. And for a brief moment, it seemed like he had finally reached the role he had spent his entire life preparing for. But that moment did not last long. Almost immediately, concerns about his health became impossible to ignore, and the cancer diagnosis in early 2024 sent a serious signal through the royal institution. The king was no longer seen as a distant, steady figure, but as someone facing real human limits, and that changed how everything was viewed. At the same time, the royal family was dealing with pressure from every direction. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle continued to release statements and interviews that kept global attention fixed on internal tensions. Prince Andrew remained a lasting source of controversy, and the media showed no signs of backing off. Public opinion was shifting, and the stability of the monarchy was being questioned more openly than before. In contrast, Prince William and Princess Catherine were rising in a completely different way. Through Catherine's serious health challenge and her strong recovery, and through their careful and steady return to public duties, they began to build a deeper connection with the public. William appeared more confident on the global stage, and together they represented a sense of stability that people had been looking for. The public response was not just acceptance, it was genuine support and emotional connection, something that had not been seen in years and reminded many of an earlier era in the monarchy.
So whatever faith you have or whether you have none, it is in this life-giving.
And Charles saw this clearly, which raises an important question that likely stayed with him during quiet moments. When does serving the monarchy mean stepping aside for its future? Then came the meeting that changed everything. It was never announced, never leaked, and never placed on any official schedule. But inside Buckingham Palace, a private gathering took place that would shape the future of the monarchy. Charles called the meeting himself, fully aware of the weight of what he was about to say. The room itself reflected the seriousness of the moment, with chandeliers casting light across polished floors and portraits of past monarchs watching silently from the walls. Around the table sat the core of the royal family, the same people Charles had spent years trying to hold together. Prince William arrived composed, already sensing the importance of the moment, while Princess Catherine sat beside him, calm and steady, reflecting the image of stability the public had come to trust. When Charles stood to speak, the tone of the room shifted immediately. His voice was steady, but there was something new in it, something final that could not be ignored. He spoke about time, about duty, and about the realities that come with leadership and health. He did not speak emotionally, but with clarity, as someone who had already made his decision. Then he said it clearly. He announced his intention to step down and transfer the responsibilities of the crown to Prince William and Princess Catherine, placing the future of the monarchy into the hands of the next generation. The room fell completely silent. No one interrupted, no one reacted loudly, but the weight of the moment was clear. Even the sound of a clock seemed louder than usual. William remained still, holding his composure, while Catherine's expression stayed calm, though her eyes showed that she fully understood what this meant. Then the silence broke. A chair moved sharply across the floor, cutting through the stillness. Queen Camilla stood up. This raises a serious question. What would lead someone who fought so hard to secure her place in the monarchy to stand and challenge the king at such a critical moment? What was she trying to protect? And was it the institution, Charles himself, or something more personal? The Camilla who stood in that room was not the familiar public version people had grown used to. Her expression showed clear tension, and her tone carried a firmness that demanded attention. When she spoke, it was controlled and deliberate, shaped by years of understanding how to present disagreement carefully. She argued that William was not yet ready, that he lacked the experience needed to fully handle the traditions and responsibilities that define the monarchy, making it clear that this decision was far more complicated than it seemed. The timing, she insisted, was completely wrong, dangerously rushed, almost reckless. On the surface, her words sounded calm and logical, carefully chosen to seem responsible and measured. But no one in that room was focused only on what she said. They were watching her closely, noticing the small details she could not hide. The way her fingers tightened around her handbag, turning pale under the pressure, the slight tremor at the corner of her mouth. These were not the signs of a composed, concerned figure speaking for the good of the monarchy. These were the signs of something far more personal. This was a woman watching everything she had built begin to fall apart right in front of her eyes. Because the truth, the one no one dared to say out loud, was already understood by everyone in that room. Camilla's identity, her position, her hard-earned acceptance, all of it was tied directly to one thing: her place beside Charles. She had reshaped her image over decades, transforming from one of the most criticized figures in public life into a recognized member of the royal family. Not fully embraced, not universally loved, but accepted. And now, with power shifting away from Charles and toward William, a quiet but brutal question hung in the air. What exactly would be left for her? Her interruption cut through the room sharply, like something delicate being torn apart in an instant. Charles did not react immediately. He stood still, frozen in place, and the weight of that moment pressed heavily on him. This was not an outsider challenging him, not a journalist or a critic. This was the woman he had loved for most of his life. The one he had stood beside through years of public backlash, through scandal, through relentless headlines. And now, in front of his son and daughter-in-law, in front of the very people he was preparing to entrust with the future of the monarchy, she had openly challenged him. The shift in his expression did not go unnoticed. Those watching later described how the color drained from his face, moving from shock to something far more serious. You could not see the full fracture, but you could feel it spreading through the room. It was Prince William who moved first. Without raising his voice or creating any scene, he stood and stepped forward, positioning himself beside his father. His tone was calm, controlled, but carried a quiet authority as he announced that the meeting would end so everyone could take time to reflect. It was handled with precision, with control, and it sent a message that did not need to be explained. The room began to empty quickly, conversations cut short, tension lingering in the air. And as Camilla walked out through those grand doors, one thing became clear to everyone left behind. Nothing inside Buckingham Palace would remain the same after this. When the door to the king's private study closed, the sound carried a finality that felt almost like judgment being passed. Inside, the familiar scent of sandalwood and aged paper filled the room, a reminder of years of duty and preparation. But now, instead of comfort, it felt heavy, almost suffocating. Charles stood still, his back to the door, his shoulders tense in a way that revealed just how deep the moment had cut. His hands, marked by time and responsibility, gripped the edge of the oak desk tightly, the pressure visible in his knuckles. These were hands that had signed documents, greeted leaders, carried out duty without hesitation, and now they held onto the desk as if grounding him in place. Camilla followed him inside and stopped in the center of the room. Her posture remained upright, controlled, shaped by years of knowing how to present herself with authority. But her eyes told a different story. Beneath that composed exterior, there was fear. Real fear. The kind that appears when someone realizes they may have gone too far to turn back. When she spoke again, what she said would later be described by those aware of the conversation as one of the most serious missteps in modern royal history. She did not stay in the present. She reached backward, pulling from parts of Charles's past that had always been deeply personal, deeply protected. She brought up memories he had spent a lifetime trying to leave behind. His time at Gordonstoun, the strict boarding school he had once described in deeply negative terms. The isolation, the difficulty, the emotional weight of those years. Experiences that shaped him but were never meant to be used against him. She knew these things because he had trusted her. In private moments, away from public life, he had shared those parts of himself with her. And now, in this tense and desperate situation, she made it clear, not directly but strongly enough, that those memories did not have to stay private. It was not a loud threat, not an obvious one, but it was unmistakable. And instead of breaking him, it changed him. Charles turned slowly to face her, and the look in his eyes was no longer familiar. The hesitation, the need for reassurance, the quiet search for approval that had followed him for years, it was gone. In its place was something firmer, something resolved. In that moment, he seemed to understand something clearly for the first time, that the person he had relied on may not have been what he believed. He moved to his desk, picked up his pen, and began to write. He did not respond to her words, did not argue, did not acknowledge her directly. He simply acted, and Camilla stood there, watching as the man she thought she understood became completely unreachable. Nothing in the room had physically changed, the same furniture, the same walls, the same quiet ticking of the clock, but the balance between them had shifted so completely that it felt like an entirely different space. She had entered that room expecting to gain control of the situation, but instead, something between them had been permanently broken, beyond repair, beyond reconciliation. Later that night, long after the palace had gone quiet, Charles moved through its corridors with a different presence. The hesitation that had once defined his movements was gone. His steps were steady, deliberate, carrying a sense of purpose that had not been there before. When he reached the private study of the Prince of Wales, William opened the door without ceremony. There were no formalities, no careful introductions. This was not that kind of conversation. Charles sat down and spoke plainly. He shared everything, every detail of what had been said, every implication, every line that had been crossed. There was no softening of the truth, no attempt to protect anyone involved. It was direct and clear. William listened without interruption, his expression controlled, his posture still. But the tension in his hands, gripping the chair, revealed the intensity beneath the surface. In that moment, he saw both the king and the father, the public figure facing a serious betrayal, and the man who, despite everything, was finally reaching out in complete honesty. What formed in that room was more than a decision about the monarchy. It was a shift in trust, something deeper and more personal, built between two men who had long struggled to fully connect. And William did not hesitate. He moved forward with focus, already thinking ahead, outlining the next steps, the structure of what would come next, how the announcement would be handled, and how the family would respond to what was now set in motion. The sharp, decisive thinking that had been building quietly behind William's controlled public image was now impossible to ignore. This was no longer someone waiting for direction or approval. This was a man already moving, already deciding, already stepping into power without hesitation. When dawn began to creep in, they were still working. The room had not changed, but the energy inside it had completely shifted. And when Charles finally stood and placed his hand on William's shoulder, it was not just a gesture. In a world where even small moments are carefully measured and controlled, that single touch carried the weight of something permanent, something final, something that could not be undone. The transfer of power had already happened. Not in a grand hall, not beneath a crown, but in a quiet, lamplit room, in the hours when the rest of the world was asleep. One king stepping back, another stepping forward, and no ceremony needed to make it real. The second meeting felt entirely different from the first. Where the first had been emotional, tense, and disrupted, this one was precise, controlled, almost clinical in its execution. Every detail had been planned in advance, from who would sit where to which documents would be placed on the table, and even who would be included or left noticeably on the outside. Queen Camilla entered wearing deep emerald velvet, her appearance carefully constructed, every detail intentional. It was presentation as strategy, the outward confidence of someone who understood that image might be the last form of influence she had left. But the moment she stepped inside and took in the room, everything shifted. William and Catherine were positioned closer to the king than ever before, a visual signal that did not need explanation. The subtle balance of power had been rearranged, and it was clear to anyone paying attention. Camilla scanned the room quickly, searching for familiar support, for even one reassuring glance. There was none. Faces that once showed quiet alignment now offered only neutral expressions. No signals, no silent alliances, nothing to hold on to. The shift had already happened overnight, and she had walked in too late to stop it. When Charles stood to speak, the difference from before was immediate and undeniable. His voice was steady, firm, completely free of hesitation. There was no trace of emotional conflict, no uncertainty. This was not a discussion anymore. This was a decision being delivered. He restated his intention to step down and laid out the transition with clear, structured detail. Every step was defined, every outcome already set in motion. And most noticeably, he did not look at Camilla once. Not a glance, not a pause, not even a moment of acknowledgement. That absence spoke louder than anything else in the room. For decades, there had always been some instinct to check her reaction, to read her expression, to include her presence in his decisions. Now, that connection was gone, completely and deliberately. Camilla tried to push back without speaking, using small gestures, a slight movement of her head, a controlled sigh, subtle attempts to interrupt the rhythm of his words. She had planned to escalate if needed, to bring forward what she had hinted at before, to force a reaction that might shift the outcome. But then she looked at William and stopped. What she saw was not hesitation, not concern, not even anger. It was something far more controlled and far more powerful. It was the calm focus of someone watching a mistake unfold in real time, someone who already understood the outcome and saw no reason to interfere. William sat completely still, his hands resting flat against the table, his presence alone setting the tone. There was no need for raised voices or dramatic gestures. Authority had already settled into place. Beside him, Catherine remained composed, steady, completely aligned. Together, they formed something Camilla had not anticipated, a unified front that could not be divided, a generational shift happening in real time. One by one, the others in the room began to show their agreement. Small nods, quiet but firm, no hesitation, no debate. No one stepped in to support Camilla's position. No one questioned the timing. The outcome had already been accepted. Before Charles had even finished speaking, the official document was placed on the table. William stood and accepted it with visible respect, a moment that carried both formality and emotion. Catherine offered a small, understanding smile, not celebratory, but aware of the responsibility now resting on their shoulders. Camilla remained still, her gaze fixed away from the table, as if watching something already slipping out of reach. The shift had happened, and there was nothing left to stop it. The chapter she had worked toward for years had closed, not gradually, but all at once. News of the abdication reached the public in the familiar way such major royal developments always do, through a controlled release that felt like a leak but functioned as a planned reveal. The palace quickly confirmed that the king would address the nation directly. The morning of the speech carried a different kind of silence inside Buckingham Palace. Staff moved carefully, aware that they were part of a moment that would be remembered far beyond that day. William and Catherine were present, along with their children, the next generation already inside the walls that would define their future. Charles chose his appearance carefully. Not the full display of royal power, not the heavy symbolism of ceremony, but something quieter, more personal. This was not about showing authority. It was about letting it go with dignity. When he stepped forward and began to speak, his tone was calm and measured. He spoke about his mother, about the example she had set, a standard that defined an entire era. He spoke about service, not as an idea, but as a daily reality shaped by duty and responsibility above all else. Then he turned to William and Catherine, and his words carried a warmth that stood out even to those who knew him well. He did not simply name them as successors, he described what he had seen in them. William's clarity, his judgment, his strength under pressure. Catherine's steadiness, her ability to connect, her way of making the institution feel human while still preserving its weight. He made it clear that this decision was not about stepping away in weakness, but about choosing the right moment to secure the future. To step aside while still able to guide the transition and witness it with clarity. One detail did not go unnoticed. He never mentioned Camilla, not once. And in that silence, The message was understood more clearly than if it had been spoken directly. The absence said everything that needed to be said. He ended his speech with something that felt more personal than formal, speaking directly to the people, emphasizing that the strength of the crown had never come from the individual wearing it, but from the people who stood behind it. Then he stepped back, and just like that, it was over. In the days that followed, everything began to move forward with the steady rhythm of tradition. Plans for the coronation of King William V and Queen Catherine were set into motion with precision. Dates, protocols, ceremonies, all unfolding exactly as they had for generations. Charles withdrew from public life and returned to Highgrove, where those close to him noted a visible sense of relief. He spent time in his gardens, writing, reading, finally moving at a pace that had not been possible before. After a lifetime of waiting for the crown, he had worn it briefly, but his most defining act may have been knowing when to let it go. Camilla remained at Ray Mill House. Nothing was formally announced, nothing directly confirmed, but the distance between them became clear through absence rather than explanation. She continued her duties, appearing when required, maintaining composure, but something had shifted. The spaces she entered felt quieter, the connections less warm. The role she had fought to secure no longer held the same presence it once did. Meanwhile, William and Catherine stepped fully into their new roles with a natural confidence that seemed ready and waiting. Public response followed quickly, with growing support that felt genuine and grounded. They were not just seen as figures of tradition, but as people the public could relate to and understand. But one question continues to follow this entire moment. Was Camilla's decision to bring up Charles's past the critical mistake that defined everything that followed, or was it simply the moment when something long hidden became impossible to ignore? Because ambition at that level rarely disappears. It adjusts, it reshapes itself, it presents as caution or concern until the pressure becomes too great to contain it. The monarchy has survived moments like this before. It endured abdications, public crises, and major cultural shifts that challenged its place in modern society. And it will continue forward again. But it will not be the same. The version of the monarchy that William and Catherine now lead is more exposed, more closely watched, and less protected than ever before. The expectations are higher, and the room for error is smaller. William understands this clearly, and it shows in how he carries himself, combining a sense of approachability with a sharper, more strategic awareness. Catherine understands it as well, shaped by personal challenges that have strengthened her role in a way no title alone ever could. This new era is already underway. And at its center is not just a shift in power, but a deeper story about what happens when personal relationships and public duty collide at the highest level. Charles did not just give up the crown. He let go of something far more complicated, the belief that personal loyalty could always survive under pressure. Now the question remains, did he make the right choice by stepping aside at this moment, or was this the final result of a lifetime shaped by forces beyond his control? And what about Camilla? Was her move a desperate mistake or a clear reflection of how power really works behind palace walls, where emotion can quickly become strategy and loyalty can shift when everything is on the line?